Welcome to Hourglass Secrets. Picture a town where every face is familiar, every lane safe. Yet in a single moment, innocence can be shattered forever. It was a sunlit morning in Alton, Hampshire, in the summer of 1867, a day that promised laughter, freedom, and the unremarkable peace of small-town life. Children's voices echoed across Tanhouse Lane, mingling with the hum of bees in the hop fields. Among them was 8-year-old Fanny Adams, a tall, bright-eyed girl whose intelligence and charm made her seem older than her years. Known for her cheerful smile and eagerness to speak with everyone, she was beloved by neighbors and friends alike. Her life seemed perfect, the kind of childhood many would envy. Fanny's closest companion, Minnie Warner, lived next door. Together with her younger sister, Lizzie, Fanny had spent the morning exploring the Adams garden, picking wildflowers and chasing butterflies in the golden haze of sunlight. The fields beyond their homes, rich with hops, were familiar territory. The meadows had always been safe, the paths well trodden, the neighbors ever watchful. In Alton, everyone knew everyone. Strangers were rare, and danger almost inconceivable. That morning, Fanny asked her mother, Harriet, for permission to walk to the nearby flood meadow with Minnie and Lizzie. Harriet, absorbed in housework and trusting in the town's safety, nodded without hesitation. She had no reason to fear for her children. This was Alton, after all, a place where every parent felt confident that their child's laughter was shielded from harm. Yet beneath the ordinary calm of that morning, an unsettling shadow loomed. A man new to the town had already caught the girl's attention. Frederick Baker, a solicitor's clerk of 29, had moved to Alton only a year earlier. He appeared respectable, familiar from church gatherings, but appearances, as the town would say, on learn, could be deadly deceptive. Fanny, Minnie, and Lizzie skipped along the sun-warmed paths toward Flood Meadow, their voices bright against the gentle rustling of hop vines. The air was heavy with the scent of flowers and ripening hops. They laughed freely, unaware of the malevolent eyes tracking their every movement. The innocence of childhood, so vibrant and unguarded, made them vulnerable. Alton had never known serious crime. Its streets had only ever known familiarity, its fields only the joy of play. But that ordinary Saturday would mark the end of innocence for one small family, and indeed, for the town itself. A day that began with sunlight and laughter would descend into horror, leaving an entire community haunted. Before we begin, please hit subscribe and tell me, what state are you listening from? Fanny, Minnie, and Lizzie wandered further into the sunlit hop fields, their laughter blending with the gentle rustle of the vines. Then, from the shadows between the tall hop poles, emerged Frederick Baker. 29, calm and composed, a solicitor's clerk with the air of respectability. He had only been in Alton for a year, yet already seemed familiar at church gatherings. In a town where every face was known, Baker's seeming civility was disarming. He offered the children money, a halfpenny to Fanny, 3 halfpennies to Minnie and Lizzie. Small, innocent coins, yet they were the first thread in a web that would unravel lives. The girls, accustomed to neighbors' kindness, accepted them without suspicion. The sunlight glittered on their coins, masking the darkness that had quietly crept into their day. For an hour, Baker lingered at the edges of their play, his eyes tracing their steps as they ran up and down the hollow, a lane leading toward the nearby village of Sheldon. He picked blackberries for them, a gesture that reinforced the illusion of safety. But with every laugh, every carefree step, he calculated, planned, and waited. The fields, once a sanctuary of joy, became a stage for the unthinkable. Eventually, Minnie and Lizzie decided to return home, their pockets jingling with coins, their small hands sticky from blackberries. Fanny stayed behind, lingering as she often did, curious and gentle. Her refusal to accompany Baker to Sheldon, innocent, brave, and unassuming, triggered the first act of horror. In one swift motion, Baker lifted her from the ground, carrying her beyond the reach of familiar eyes, into the shadowed heart of the hop garden. Minnie and Lizzie ran to Minnie's mother, Martha Warner, breathless, wide-eyed, their words tumbling over each other.
"Fanny's gone! Frederick took her."
But Martha, steeped in the safety of a town untouched by Sate, Raya's crime dismissed the story as childish imagination. Reassured, the girls returned to play, their concern fading as quickly as it had ignited. Hours passed. Dinner came. Still, Fanny did not return. Mrs. Gardner, another neighbour, noticed the absence and questioned Lizzie. When she learned the truth, alarm surged through her veins, and she ran to Fanny's mother, Harriet Adams. Together, they raced through the fields, hearts pounding, a growing dread shadowing each step. Near the gate that separated Flood Meadow from the hop garden, they confronted Baker. Calm, polite, and unnervingly composed, he insisted Fanny was safe, that he had merely given her coins to buy sweets. Yet every word, every measured gesture, now hinted at deception. In a town that had never faced true danger, the illusion of safety shattered in a heartbeat. Harriet's chest tightened. The air seemed to still. Baker's polite smile had transformed into a mask, hiding something dark, something irretrievable. In that moment, Alton's innocence fractured. Fanny had vanished. A mother's terror rose like a storm. The fields, witnesses to childhood laughter just hours before, were now silent accomplices to a shadow creeping over the town, one that would leave grief, horror, and disbelief in its wake. Evening settled over Alton, but there was no peace. Fanny had not returned. Harriet Adams, her heart a storm of dread, and a group of neighbours scoured the hollow and surrounding hop fields. The sun dipped low, shadows stretching like fingers across the landscape. Each rustle in the leaves, each distant crow, felt like a sinister whisper. Something was terribly wrong. Then, amid the rows of tall hop poles, a figure stumbled upon a scene no human heart should ever witness. Thomas Gates, a veteran of the Crimean War, had seen horrors in distant lands. Blood, suffering, death. But nothing could have prepared him for this. Perched atop 2 hop poles lay the severed head of a child. The sight was incomprehensible. Fanny's ear had been severed, 2 deep cuts slashing across her temple. Her body, mutilated beyond recognition, had been dismembered with methodical cruelty. Arms, legs, and even parts of her torso were scattered across the field. 5 incisions marked the liver. Her heart had been removed, her eyes discovered downstream in the River Wey. Her left forearm severed at the elbow, her left foot nearly detached, every cut precise, yet terrifyingly violent. Grief struck Harriet like a physical blow. She collapsed, helpless, her world imploding as the truth of her daughter's fate settled around her. George Adams, her husband, was away, playing cricket, a trivial normality now shattered. When the news reached him, fury and despair combined. He seized a loaded shotgun, ready to exact his own justice on the monster who had done this. Neighbours restrained him, but the instinct for vengeance burned hot in his veins, understandable, yet chilling. The town of Alton, a place untouched by true crime, now faced the unthinkable. A mother's cries echoed across the fields, blending with the murmurs of the shocked crowd gathering around the scene. The hop garden, once a place of hurrah, vest and play, had transformed into a landscape of terror. Every footstep threatened to obscure evidence, every sob to erase traces of the unimaginable. Police Superintendent William Cheney arrived, his calm authority struggling against the mounting horror. The Leathern Bottle public house held a grim bundle labelled "Portions of a Child," collected by townspeople. The search for remaining parts became a race against time, against grief, against the creeping horror that settled over Alton. The town's collective innocence had been shattered. Each person felt the chill of understanding, that evil could lurk even in the most familiar places. Frederick Baker, the man last seen with Fanny, was now under intense scrutiny. His calm demeanour, once mistaken for respectability, now twisted into something sinister in the minds of those who had known him. Yet, at that moment, No one could fully comprehend the scale of his atrocity. The pieces of Fanny Adams' life, her laughter, her curiosity, her very existence, lay scattered across the hop garden, a silent testament to cruelty that defied reason. Alton would never forget that evening. The sun set on a town forever altered, and the shadow of what had occurred in those golden fields stretched far beyond the hop poles. It was the first chapter in a tragedy that would grip the nation, a story of innocence stolen, of brutality unimaginable, and of a community forced to confront darkness in its purest form. As night fell over Alton, the air grew thick with tension and fear. Frederick Baker, still composed and unflinching, remained at his solicitor's office long past working hours. Outside, a crowd had begun to gather, curious, anxious, and simmering with anger. Word of Fanny's disappearance and the discovery of her mutilated body spread like wildfire. The villagers' faces were etched with disbelief, their minds struggling to reconcile the boyish laughter of the morning with the nightmare of the evening. Police Superintendent William Cheney approached Baker with caution, aware that this man, so ordinary, so polite, was now the prime suspect in what had become the most horrifying crime in living memory. Baker claimed innocence. His voice was calm, his eyes steady. Yet beneath the veneer of civility, something darker lurked, something chillingly methodical. At the police station, Baker was searched. 2 small knives were found, unstained and seemingly innocuous. Spots of blood appeared on his trousers and shirt cuffs, but he offered no explanation beyond, "I don't see a scratch or cut on my hands to account for the blood." His demeanor was unnerving, a man untroubled by the chaos his actions had caused, a predator cloaked in composure. Hours later, Cheney returned to Baker's office. Buried among legal papers, he discovered a diary. One entry froze the breath of everyone who read it. 24th of August, Saturday. Killed a young girl. It was fine and hot. The words, stark and unadorned, revealed a mind unclouded by remorse, a calculated recording of a crime committed in cold daylight. This was no moment of passion or fleeting insanity. It was premeditated, observed, and documented with chilling clarity. Baker remained unaffected by the growing hysteria outside. While Alton grieved and the townspeople whispered of vengeance, he sat within, his conscience seemingly untroubled. Reports noted his interactions with officers were calm, his speech precise, almost rehearsed. He ate, he slept, he conversed with the same polite manner as any other day. There was no tremor of guilt, no shiver of fear, only the eerie poise of a man detached from humanity. In those moments, a terrifying realization dawned on the community. The monster who had shattered their world did not resemble a grotesque stranger. He resembled them, dressed in a coat and hat, blending seamlessly into the familiar streets of Alton. The horror was magnified not only by what had been done, but by the unnerving normalcy of the perpetrator. Cheney and his officers prepared to transport Baker to Winchester Prison, aware that the shadow of Fanny's murder had cast a pall over every home, every family. The diary, the calm composure, and the meticulous nature of the crime transformed fear into a chilling certainty. Alton's innocence was gone, and the very idea of trust would never again feel the same. Even as Baker's figure disappeared into the night, escorted under watchful eyes, the town remained frozen in the aftermath, an uneasy silence settling over the hop fields. The calm of a monster had been revealed, but the questions, the shock, and the simmering dread would linger far longer, shaping the community's collective memory for generations to come. The days following Fanny's murder were a blur of shock, disbelief, and relentless investigation. Alton, a town that had once known nothing more sinister than a quarrel over land or a spilled pint, was now the stage for a nightmare that defied comprehension. Every neighbor, every friend, felt the shadow of horror that had descended upon the Adams family. And yet, even amidst despair, the meticulous work of justice began. A young boy who lived near the Adams family stepped forward, his voice trembling yet clear. He revealed that on the afternoon of 24th of August, he had seen Frederick Baker emerge from the hop garden, his hands and clothes soaked in blood. With an almost surreal calm, Baker had stooped by the river way, wiping himself with a handkerchief before slipping a small knife and another object into his pocket. 2 months had passed since the sight, but the boy could no longer keep silent, the weight of truth pressing him to speak. Meanwhile, Cheney pressed forward with the investigation, determined to leave no stone unturned. Every scrap of evidence, every fragment of Fanny's destroyed innocence was examined. Baker's clothing, his waistcoat, trousers, and even his stockings bore faint traces of diluted blood, evidence of his attempts to erase the crime's marks. The 2 knives recovered at the time of arrest were sent to A.S. Taylor at Guy's Hospital in London. In a meticulous examination, Taylor confirmed the presence of human blood on the knives. Yet, the quantity seemed almost deliberate, small enough to suggest skill, careful enough to avoid immediate detection. The post-mortem results conducted by local surgeon Lewis Leslie revealed the full extent of the atrocity. Fanny's death had likely begun with a blow from a heavy object, a stone perhaps, before she was dismembered with horrifying precision. Her body had been cut and hacked in ways that suggested not only calculation, but also a chilling familiarity with anatomy. Each incision had been deliberate, the dismemberment executed in less than an hour, minimizing blood spatter and leaving Baker with an unsettling efficiency. The forensic conclusion was inescapable. The 2 small knives Baker possessed could not have caused the vast scale of mutilation. Another instrument, heavier, more capable, must have been used. And yet the calmness with which Baker had carried out the crime and the meticulousness with which he attempted to erase its evidence revealed a terrifying intellect behind the brutality. The townspeople, following the case closely, were gripped by a mixture of horror and fascination. The meticulous nature of the investigation brought clarity to a crime that had seemed incomprehensible, yet it only deepened the dread. Here was a man, outwardly ordinary, capable of acts so monstrous and yet calm, calculating and almost clinical in execution. Fanny's life had been stolen, her body desecrated, and yet the threads of truth, witness accounts, blood evidence, expert testimony, began to weave a story too horrifying to ignore. The revelation was both chilling and necessary. Evil could wear a familiar face, hide behind civility, and commit acts beyond imagination while remaining undetected. Alton would never forget, and the town's collective memory was being forged in a crucible of fear, grief, and relentless pursuit of justice. Fanny's story, fragmented and brutal, demanded to be told, and the world would hear it. The chill of winter settled over Winchester in December 1867, but inside the courthouse, the tension was electric. The trial of Frederick Baker drew the gaze of a nation horrified and fascinated by the brutal murder of young Fanny Adams. For Alton, the courtroom was more than a place of justice. It was the stage upon which the town sought to reclaim its innocence, piece by piece, from the darkness that had invaded their lives. Witnesses gave their testimony with trembling voices. Minnie Warner described the morning's encounter, the halfpennies, the playful chase up the hollow, and the moment Baker had abducted Fanny. Harriet Adams recounted her desperate search, the confrontation at the Hop Garden gate, and the disbelief that such a horror could unfold in her tranquil town. Mrs. Gardner's testimony painted Baker as unnervingly composed, almost indifferent, even as grief and fear mounted around him. Each word, each pause, weighed heavily on the jury and the spectators, creating an oppressive atmosphere of suspense and dread. Baker's defense attempted every conceivable angle. They challenged Minnie's identification, argued that the small knives found were insufficient for the dismemberment, and even raised the spectre of insanity, citing Baker's family history of mental illness, past tragedies, and alleged eccentricities. They claimed his diary entry was merely a formal habit of notation, an epileptic style of writing. Yet the evidence was overwhelming. The boy who witnessed Baker covered in blood, the traces of blood on his clothing, and the meticulous forensic findings that proved a calculated, deliberate killing. The jury deliberated for just 15 minutes. The verdict was swift, unanimous, and resolute: guilty. Frederick Baker had taken the life of an innocent child in the most grotesque and calculated way imaginable. Justice, cold and inevitable, was pronounced. On Christmas Eve, 1867, Baker was hanged outside Winchester Prison. Over 5,000 spectators gathered, many women and children among them, bearing witness to the final chapter of the man who had shattered the peace of Alton. It was the last public execution at the prison, a grim reminder of society's confrontation with evil. Before his death, Baker wrote to Harriet and George Adams, expressing sorrow for an unguarded hour and pleading for their forgiveness. His words, however, could not erase the horror, nor could they restore the bright, lively life of Fanny Adams. Her story, seared into the memory of Alton and the nation, would endure far beyond the courtroom. Fanny was laid to rest in Alton Cemetery, her headstone erected through voluntary subscription, a community determined not to let her be forgotten. Yet her legacy took on a strange, macabre twist. In 1869, British sailors encountering new tinned mutton rations remarked they were so unappetizing they might as well be Fanny Adams herself. The phrase Fanny Adams became slang for anything worthless, and Sweet Fanny Adams evolved into a euphemistic minced oath, immortalizing her name in a way both haunting and bizarre. In the end, Fanny Adams' life, tragically brief, was never forgotten. The town that once knew innocence learned the sharp taste of horror. Justice had been served, but the shadow remained. Her story, transformed into folklore, slang, and memory, continued to grip the minds of those who heard it. It was a tale of innocence stolen, of a predator cloaked in normality, and of a community forever changed, an enduring reminder that even the smallest, brightest lives can leave the darkest impressions.